It's very clear that what he is doing is not working with voters. It doesn't mean it's not dangerous, but as a political issue, it's a big, fat loser. Welcome back to Polar Coaster. I'm Dan Pfeiffer. On today's show, we'll dig into how voters are reacting to Trump using U.S. federal troops in American cities. We're going to look at who voters are blaming for the government shutdown, and then I'll answer your Discord questions. Joining me, as always, is Caroline Reston. Caroline, how are you?
I'm great. So just to catch people up, it's been a dramatic few days in Portland, Oregon. After continuing protests at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office, Trump began an effort to deploy the National Guard into the city over the opposition of city and state officials. So Governor Newsom has said that America is on the brink of martial law. Since then, 2 federal judges temporarily blocked the order from the administration. And CNN's Harry Enton is calling Trump's moves here a political loser. Do you agree?
I do agree. I'll get to that in a second. But where it's not just Portland, we also have the deployment of National Guard troops to Chicago for similar reasons. A judge refused to block the movement of troops to Chicago, but there's a hearing later this week, so we'll see what happens there. But I 100% agree with Harry, as I often do. Voters do not want this. Trump's fascist cosplay act does not land well with voters. There's a CBS YouGov poll that came out over the weekend that shows that 61% of Americans oppose sending active U.S. duty military troops to American cities. 58% oppose sending National Guard troops. Now, I am curious about the 3% of people who are upset about active duty troops but okay with the National Guard, but that's neither here nor there. And when Trump first sent troops to Washington, D.C., there was this eruption among pundits and Democratic strategists saying this is a trap. I remember Chris Cillizza who said this is a trap. Democrats can't fall into it. Crime is Trump's strongest issue. Don't fall into this trap. Don't just be silent. Don't say anything about you be using U.S. troops to invade American cities. You must be quiet about that for reasons like because how you could possibly do that, I don't know. But it still makes no political sense. Like in this CNN poll, they asked people to rank their issues that they care about most. Crime is a distant fourth. Only 9% of people say crime is their number one issue. So even if Trump is focusing on crime, he's not focusing on the thing that people want. The poll also asked people if Trump was focusing too much on putting troops in U.S. cities, and 52% said yes. But more important than anything else you will hear about polling on this issue or any other issue is they ask them, is the Trump administration focusing too much or too little on lowering prices? And 75% of people said he was focusing too little on lowering prices. So that means, even if you just assume like 2024 numbers, that means that 27% of his voters think he's not focusing enough on lower prices. A quarter of people who voted for Trump think he's not focusing on lowering prices because he's doing all this other stuff. This is it's very clear that what he is doing is not working with voters. It doesn't mean it's not dangerous. It doesn't mean does not portend something very concerning about the future of democracy and the rule of law in this country. But as a political issue, it's a big, fat fucking loser.
So like you were saying, like crime and immigration, those are supposed to be winning issues for him. And according to the poll you were just saying, people are disapproving of Trump on immigration by 55%. So why is he so hell-bent on pursuing this specifically?
Because he's handed over management of the entire federal government to a two-bit fascist like Stephen Miller, right? Who this is his dream, is to get people who were did not arrive here on the Mayflower or descended from people who arrived here on the Mayflower out of this country as soon as humanly possible. And so they are pushing full bore in ways that are incredibly politically damaging. Sure, Trump did talk about mass deportation during the campaign. He did, if you listen to his rallies, a lot of the things that are happening were warned about. But most people didn't watch the 2-hour insane rallies. They just sort of surfed the news. They saw the ads. And when they thought about what Trump was going to do about immigration was secure the border, because they were very concerned about chaos at the border, large numbers of migrants coming into cities. And they thought he was going to get criminals and drug dealers out of America. And he's gone so far beyond that he's gone too far. And a bunch of in the New York Times stand-up poll, they asked people if Trump has gone too far. They think he's gone too far in immigration. He has gone beyond what his mandate with the electorate is. And all these scenes of Black Hawk helicopters flying in the city of Chicago. People rappelling down the sides of the building, like zip tying children. Like that is not what people voted for, and that's why they are rejecting it.
Did you see that clip of Stephen Miller on Laura Ingram's show where they play a clip of AOC repeatedly joking that he's 5'11" or 4'11"?
4'10". She says he's 4'10", yeah.
Then it's played on loop for him to react to. I was like,
Yeah.
it's so fucking funny.
There is a lesson there from AOC that other Democrats could do, which is oftentimes the best way to take on these people is to make fun of them, to ridicule them. Like you want to take these wannabe strongmen and these wannabe authoritarians, and you want to make them seem weaker. And oftentimes ridicule is a great way to do that. She did that very well.
Yeah, it's upsetting how many powerful, terrible men are incredibly short. Do
you think those things are related? Do you think they might have possibly taken the name of a very famous, very short man who did lots of things and then applied it to a complex of sorts?
I definitely think they may have done that.
As a man of above average American height.
I know it's easy for you. Although, short kings are having their moment right now, but we need to take that away now.
This problem is that some kings are mad, as we learned in Game of Thrones.
Okay, so let's talk about the shutdown. So at the time of this recording, we're 7 days into the government shutdown. There have been a bunch of polls since then asking voters who they blame. And while polls are showing that the blame is leaning towards Trump and Republicans, voters by and large are pretty split. So can you walk us through the latest and where voters stand on this?
There's been much polls over the last 2 weeks here, both before the shutdown and since the shutdown started. They all showed the same thing, which is a plurality of voters blame Trump and the Republicans more than they blame Democrats in Congress. That has been very clear. I will say that there's a Morning Consult poll. Morning Consult does tracking polls. They had a poll that came out on Monday, which showed still a plurality of Republicans, but an increase in the number of people who mentioned Democrats. That's kind of to be expected because there was a pretty decent chunk of, depending on how you ask a chunk of people who don't know or blame equally. And then the don't know section will sort of allocate in a way that probably moves a little bit more towards Democrats. But here's my take on this. I think that's the wrong question to ask. I think that Democrats are too obsessed with this question. Every time they're like, hashtag Trump shut down, Trump shut the government down. It's just like, that's not the point. That's not good messaging. It doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is the government shut down. What you should talk about is why the government shut down and what you're fighting for and demanding in order to open it. And when you operate on that level, you're going to have much more strength. And so I'm going to take a step back for a second, which is there were a lot of people who argued that it was a mistake for Democrats to go down this path. Like, we can have this epistemological argument about whether Republicans shut it down or Democrats shut it down, but ultimately Democrats are the ones not giving their votes to the Senate Republicans right now to open it up. And the people who were saying it was a bad idea for Democrats to do this say that in every single shutdown in modern history, the party that quote unquote initiated the shutdown lost. And so that includes the Gingrich Republicans in 95. That includes the Ted Cruz Republicans in 2013. That includes Donald Trump shutting down his own government in 2019. The Democrats did briefly shut down the government in 2018 over the DREAM Act. But honestly, I think the government shut down on Friday and opened on Monday. So I don't think it really counts. I think it was shut down for a total of one working day. But in the other three examples I mentioned, in every case, the way the history has been written is like that was a huge loser for Gingrich and the Republicans, huge loser for Ted Cruz, and then Trump obviously hurt himself by shutting down his own government. What I think that analysis lacks is context, which is in each of those cases, the Republicans who shut down the government shut it down to demand unpopular things. The 95, 96 shutdown was around a bunch of things, but it included cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, which we know were always unpopular. The 2013 shutdown was about defunding the Affordable Care Act. Majorities thought that was a terrible idea. One poll had like 70% of people thought it was not worth shutting down the government over. When Trump shut down the government in 2019, he did it to demand funding for his border wall. Large majorities opposed the border wall. Large majorities thought it was not something worth shutting down the government for. What's different this time is that Democrats are fighting to extend the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act. A Kaiser Family Foundation poll that came out earlier this week showed that 78% of Americans think the tax credit should be extended. Okay. That includes huge majorities of Republicans, and listen to this number, 57% of voters who identify as MAGA supporters think the tax credit should be extended. It's almost impossible to find an issue with this level of bipartisan support in such highly polarized times. Democrats have a very, very strong hand to play here, and they are very much arguing for something that people want. And perhaps even more importantly, earlier this summer, a memo went around saying that if Republicans failed to extend the tax credits, they would get walloped in the House. There was a poll that was done that would show that the generic ballot would go from -3 for Republicans to -15. The author of that memo was Tony Fabrizio, who also just happens to be Trump's pollster. And so Republicans, they're talking a tough game. They're out there, but they are in a very bad place. And they think that doubling premiums on working families at a time in which inflation is the number one issue and Trump's approval rating on inflation is -30 points, then they're in a deeply, deeply dangerous spot. So I think Democrats actually have a very, very strong hand to play here. Yes, they're winning the blame game right now. I think the blame game is less important than what you're actually fighting for. What are the consequences to Republicans if they do not do what Democrats want?
How do Democrats' message break through when, I'm operating in, a liberal bubble, but what I'm seeing constantly from Republicans and from conservative pundits is this idea that Democrats are trying to fund healthcare for undocumented immigrants, which is just categorically false. But that's the repeated talking point from them that is seeming like it's sticking.
Yeah, I need to see some polling to see if it is sticking, which I have not seen yet. I'm not sure on its face that it's an entirely credible attack. I'm just not sure that people actually believe that. Democrats have to get louder. That's one thing that is true. We have to be louder and more specific. I've watched a bunch of Democrats on TV and in podcasts and other things over the last 7 days here. And they're doing a good job of being out there a lot, but they just need to say, and I thought this was very true in this video that AOC and Bernie did together, was just this month, notices are going out for the people's premiums are going to go way up. It could cost families $20,000 a year more. Your premiums could double. Democrats are trying to stop that from happening. Republicans want it to happen. That's what the shutdown's about. Just more specificity about that to raise the salience of what is actually at stake here would be good. That's it for this week's preview of Polar Coaster. If you want to watch the rest of this episode, become a paid member of this channel by clicking the join button below. When you subscribe, you'll get more exclusive content and ad-free episodes of Pod Save America and more crooked shows. Plus, joining is the best way to directly support our efforts to build a counterweight to right-wing media like Fox News. You can learn more at crooked.com/friends. Thanks, and see you next time.